Third down and 20.
Trending up, trending down. We're going to do our off-season buy and sell. So this is just going to be a segment about guys that, maybe didn't have the best year and we want to buy. Maybe you think they're going to continue to get better and you want to buy. Versus guys that we think are rated too high right now or just are abandoning ship overall. So I'll kick it off with my buy. My buy is Michael Gallup. He did not have such a good year, albeit his quarterbacks of Ben DiNucci and Andy Dalton aren't great, but he still managed to have, I think it was around 600 yards and about 6 touchdowns. I can pull up the exact stats, but yeah, he ended up with 500 yards or 800 yards, 850 yards on 59 receptions and 5 touchdowns. So he ended up not having a bad year, despite the QB play and despite the Cowboys taking CeeDee Lamb in the first round last year and Amari Cooper being on the roster. This Cowboys offense just completely underperformed, obviously, once Dak got hurt. And moving forward with assuming they re-sign Dak, I just think this offense not goes back to what we saw in the first 5 weeks of the year before the Dak injury, but definitely takes a big step back in the right direction. And on top of that, Michael Gallup, he had 1,000 yards last year prior to the Cowboys drafting CeeDee Lamb. He is a free agent following the 2021 season. I think he has so much upside. He is a young player, and someone is going to sign him to be their, wide receiver 2. Maybe a bad team, he'll be the wide receiver 1. I just think there's so much potential in Michael Gallup that it is worth worth anything, not anything, but the low price that you'd have to pay for him at the.
Yeah, so my issue is, are you concerned about the Cowboys, what they might do with this offseason in regards to going out and getting another wide receiver or maybe drafting the Kyle Pitts type and everything, and just the ball even being spread around more on offense?
I mean, listen,
would be such a Jerry Jones move.
I've seen a lot of mocks that have Kyle Pitts going to the Cowboys at pick 10. That would clearly spread the ball out even thinner, and that would be an issue. It would be like the most Jerry Jones pick if like Jalen Waddle or like Jamar Chase or whoever was like the number 1 receiver on his board was still there at pick 10, and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna take him, just because that's basically what he did last year with CeeDee Lamb. But I don't think that'll happen. I think Pitts to fill that tight end hole that's been pretty much barren since like Jason Witten left years ago and then came back and then left again. I don't know, that their tight end position's been not great in the past few years, but I don't know. I'm a little concerned, but the other thing is here is that he is a free agent after the 2021 season, which is very important, because if that team does get spread even thinner with the addition of another offensive weapon, there's no way they're going to be able to pay him. He's a guy that's already had 1,000-yard receiving season. He had 800 yards this year with a horrible quarterback situation. He's a good receiver. People know it, and people are going to pay him, and the Cowboys just are not going to have the cap.
I actually agree with you, and I can't get too into it because part of that Cowboys receiving core I'm going to bring up later in one of my trending up, trending down players. But Michael Gallup is an extremely talented receiver that I think anyone who buys him right now, you're buying low on him in terms of long term. We saw, like Jake mentioned last year, I think as a 23-year-old, he had 1,100 yards, and that was with missing like 2 or 3 games too. I don't know what happens to Dallas. I don't know if, as I mentioned, they get rid of Cooper, which again I will get into Cooper later, or if he ends up on a different team after this season. But I think now is the time to buy him, because if he is going to leave, not this offseason, but next offseason, his value will already be way up by next offseason, because everyone's already going to be talking like, oh, buy him before he signs with the team. If you want to play some 4D chess here, buying him now is kind of the move. And if
What do
you do
you-
have him, I think he's a hold. Just because he's insanely talented. He still managed to put up 800 yards this year with Dak getting hurt and Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb both falling out also. I'm with you, Jake. I'm a huge Michael Gallup fan for fantasy.
What do you think the price tag is currently on Michael Gallup?
I think it's still pretty high just because he is so young. I don't think it's a first, but I do think it's at least probably 2 seconds. Just because people have seen what he can do. But 2 seconds in this draft is a lot. We're gonna get into it, not this episode, but in the coming few episodes this offseason of how deep this draft is and how good these draft prospects are. So 2 seconds in this draft class is a lot, but I think Michael Gallup is just a guy that's worth it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have him probably, if I had to say one pick specifically, an extremely early second. I don't know if I can go late first yet, but a very early second. How do you feel, JT?
That's about where I don't know. I get he's got the talent, but like we said, there is a lot of talented wide receivers coming out this year. So
There are.
and I'm sure some of them will end up in better situations than the third wide receiver competing with targets.
It's kind of how yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of how you would compare him to like a Bateman, a Rondell Moore, Kadarius Toney. It's kind of like how would you rank him compared to those guys coming in as rookies?
Yeah.
Because those are guys I expect to go top of the second.
So I guess I'd give up a mid-second, but yeah, I don't know. It's tough, but right around there, I guess. Who is your sells, Jake? /sell?
My sells, I have two. They're both a little hot here, a little spicy takes.
Yes.
Pretty spicy.
Pretty spicy. My first one is DeAndre Swift, and I know JT, you love him. You
I'm gonna get on my
love
soapbox.
you love
It's
your
JT's
DeAndre
child.
Swift
You
too.
go ahead, Frank. I don't know how good you are with
Gotta watch him out.
Photoshop, but get me like preaching in the back.
If you reach over one of those video
Get me
boxes
like
and
ready
show
to give us. Go ahead, Jake. Give it to me.
All right. I'm just going to start by saying I like DeAndre Swift. I think he's a very good player. I had him as my number 2 running back coming into the draft last year. He had a good rookie season, not great. He started to come on at the end of the season, especially receiving. The reason I have him as a sell right now is because where people in the Dynasty community are ranking him right now. Right now, people have him. I think we saw him as high as like running back like 5. Was that like as high as we saw him around there? Which to me is ridiculous. Like, yes, he's a very good back. Showed a lot of promise, but he's realistically had about 2, 3 good NFL games. So to me, it's just really hard to get behind that. And if you could get him, or sell him off for what people are buying him for right now, like, multiple first round picks and a good young player, I just don't see how you could possibly turn that down for a guy that's had, like I said, 2, 3 good games in the NFL.
Soapbox time. So where I gotta disagree with you is, yes, he hasn't had many good games, but when he gets over 10 carries, he averages over 20 points per game. When he gets over 10 carries, which is what you want from
Which happened what?
five
Twice?
times. 5 times. 5 times he's gotten over 10 carries.
And he put up 20 points. Didn't he have like one game where he had like 36 or 7 points or something like that? That's gonna bloat the entire numbers.
His highest game was 26 against Jacksonville in half-point PPR.
Okay.
Yeah. Denied. So that's step 1. Step 2, he's one of the top pass catching running backs in the league. Like, you've got Christian McCaffrey, you've got Alvin Kamara. Then I think it's DeAndre Swift. I mean, maybe you could make the argument
I
that
agree. Listen,
Okay.
Aaron Jones.
listen.
Aaron Jones.
When we set our running back rankings earlier in the show, I had him right behind Taylor as the number 2 rookie running back, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't agree with the overall. He's running back 5 or running back 6, whatever people have him at right now.
So where do you
my
have
point.
where do you have him?
I have him closer to 10, which obviously isn't that far off. I understand that, and I probably have him maybe even a little outside 10 in that Akers range, similar to that, similar type of a player.
Well,
to
if
that.
you have him,
JT, as a DeAndre Swift owner,
Mhm.
if someone's coming to you and offering you straight up Nick Chubb for Swift, you're declining it.
it's a tough one, but personally, yeah, I am. I know I don't even know if the majority is. I think they're close right there.
I guess the majority's on your
I
side
think
right
Nick
now.
Chubb
Those are the
is
ADPs.
criminally. Nick Chubb as a whole is criminally underrated. By
I agree,
Dynasty
but a lot of
community.
that has to do with there is Kareem Hunt there. A lot of that has to do with you do have Kareem
Okay.
Hunt.
That doesn't matter. Look at what he's done, even with Kareem Hunt there. When they both play, they both put up numbers. It's ridiculous. It's crazy.
I get that, but it is question like DeAndre Swift. It's his backfield. Like there's
Is
no
it?
question
He
about it.
split it all year with Adrian Peterson.
He didn't split it. He at the start of the season he wasn't getting a lot of carries, right? Then he was out for a little bit due to a concussion, and that's when Peterson really had most of his carries. And then after that, it was DeAndre Swift's backfield. I mean, sometimes they had Adrian Peterson.
And like you said, he still hasn't got over 10 carries. It's not even a lot of carries.
No,
that's
he's
my point.
gotten over 10 carries. He got over
No, I
10
know,
carries 5 games at the end of the season.
Yeah, only in 5 games. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not a lot of carries. It's not like last week, Cam Akers had 28 carries in a playoff game. That's what I want to see. I want to see him get 28 carries and produce with that. Not, he had 10 carries and he averaged 6 yards a carry on 10 carries because he broke one for 30 yards. Great, we got it. He can make big plays, and he's a good pass catching back, and he's a good player. He's a very good player. I'm not downing DeAndre Swift. I'm just saying at his current value, it's a sell for me because you can get so much for him right now, and I just think that's a move.
So where I gotta disagree with you on this is, I get like he has only had 10 carries, over 10 carries, 5 games. Most of those games were the end of the year, but he had 120 carries almost on the season. He had 115 on the season. Nick Chubb had 190. I get Nick Chubb was out a couple games. So was DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift also didn't really do a whole lot in his first few games. So the disparity between the two isn't that great. You can only expect him to get more carries. Like, how is he getting less carries from here? This seems to be his floor as far as carries are concerned, unless he does get injured. But that's, if we're starting to predict injuries for running backs, it gets a little too difficult. Where it does also get positive for DeAndre Swift is the Lions' offense under Matt Patricia, was completely different than the Lions' offense under Bevel. And now you're going to go out and you're going to get a different coach who's probably going to be way better than Bevel too. Like, you just have to assume that. You have to. We're not dealing in absolutes here, but these guys weren't.
That's a safe assumption.
Yeah, these guys weren't.
Hold
great.
on. Let me jump in here because I've heard enough of this. So I'm definitely more on Jake's side. I was never a huge DeAndre Swift guy coming into the league.
On him.
I'll put the clown mask on myself. You can't see it, but I'll put it on for this. So first things first.
Put it on JT.
No. I'm not clowning. I'm clowning you, if anything, not JT.
Mine's I'm kind of with consensus here.
Yeah, the consensus is that DeAndre Swift is pretty top back. So here's my thing, right? The first reason why I think you should sell DeAndre Swift is that most of the other rookie running backs outproduced him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire did, Jonathan Taylor did, Dobbins did, James Robinson did. I'm pretty sure even Gibson did. And yes, I understand, there was injuries, but that kind of crap, it's just, how am I supposed to say a guy that didn't even have 1,000 all-purpose yards is a top 6, top 10 running back easily? First off. Second off, in terms of coaching improving under Darrell Bevell, I'm not sure you guys remember, but Darrell Bevell was the coach under Adrian Peterson when he pretty much became a Hall of Famer. He was the coach with the Seahawks under Marshawn Lynch when they were winning Super Bowls. I don't think we can assume that the coaching is going to get better for this team, especially for the running back position, given Darrell Bevell's history.
Yeah, but that's also why Adrian Peterson was getting those carries near the end of the year too. Like DeAndre Swift easily had the least amount of touches out of those guys. Like he didn't have the same kind of James Robinson had like 98% usage rate for the Jaguars. Like if you're going to give DeAndre Swift that amount of touches and that amount of usage, like he's going to do well. Like he's going to score numbers. It's just, math. Like you give someone more carries and more opportunities, he's going to score more points. I just think I get it. A lot of people are very high on him. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen him do it consistently yet. But he has shown in multiple games that he's capable of giving you those 20-plus point games if you just give him the usage. So all we're looking for is a little bit more usage for DeAndre Swift, and then he is one of those top running backs. And, you probably are going to have – you almost definitely are going to have CMC, probably Kamara, then, questionable, but probably Saquon Barkley and Dalvin Cook. And, we all said Jonathan Taylor was a better running back. But right after that, I have him right in that tier, that next tier. And I think that's where people are valuing him at. So if I'm going to sell him for running back 5 value when I figure personally he's running back 8, like there's not that much big of a difference. Like, what am I doing with the value that I get going out and trying to draft another running back? Like, if you're saying go out, get 2 more draft picks and a solid player, like we all discussed earlier, like we thought Cam Akers would be the best running back out of this draft. So if we're getting a draft pick in this draft that's not, a top draft pick, and another one and like a random player, I don't know who you guys had in mind, like we're not replacing DeAndre Swift at the running back position. We're going to lose out on the running back position if we're trying to replace him through the draft. And that's just not something I feel comfortable doing given this draft class and potentially next year's draft class as well. So that's my thought process on it.
No, that's completely fair. I don't have DeAndre Swift in the top 15 running backs in Dynasty. So that's also my thought process behind it. Yeah, I understand that now. See, that's why I said I'll wear the clown face, because I'm the one that's not in consensus right now, but that's just how I feel based off of my analysis, and I don't think I've seen anything to disprove that this season.
Where do you have him among the rookie running backs?
5 or 6.
5 or
somewhere
6.
around there. I don't understand. Is that really that hot of a take? I'd rather have Jonathan Taylor. I'd rather have Dobbins. I'd probably rather have James Robinson. And I'd rather have Gibson. So 5 or 6. Like, I may rather have Akers. Is that really that ridiculous to say? Like, I feel like the rankings with these rookies are relatively subjective as it is. We've seen 1 year.
It is.
Oh, and I even forgot Edwards-Helaire. Like, yeah. I just think we need to stop over. Like, everyone's going to have their preference. We can all agree that Jonathan Taylor had the best year. But, like, I don't think going against consensus for the rookie running backs is the craziest thing right now. Yeah, I think we can see 2 sides of the coin. I can see DeAndre Swift, like JT is saying, starting to get that 15 carries a game plus a couple of receptions a game, and all of a sudden he's one of the best backs in the NFL in terms of fantasy football. Yeah, that's completely fair. But I can also see DeAndre Swift, his efficiency numbers going way down the more he gets used in the offense, especially if they lose guys like Stafford and Golladay and Marvin Jones, and there's all these new faces coming in, new coordinators. I just don't like the continuity in that organization, especially because it's the place where players go to die.
It's interesting you think that about DeAndre Swift, but you don't think that about James Robinson. That's just like, that's kind of my feeling about James Robinson, really, where it's I
think the difference here is that we know where the Jaguars are headed right now. They just hired a coach. We'll get to that later. They have the number 1 pick. We know who's going to be their quarterback for at least the next 5 years, probably longer. They have Chark and Chenault and Robinson as offensive weapons here. I think they're honestly a team that could turn it around pretty faster than people think. Obviously, that's assuming that Lawrence lives up to all the hype that he's gotten since he was 18, 19 years old as a freshman winning the national championship. So
No, JT, you're right though. Like there is that concern with James Robinson, but I think that's more factored into his price tag way more than DeAndre Swift. And I think it's a valid concern for both guys. You're completely right in that. And I think there's a clearly valid argument for having DeAndre Swift higher than James Robinson. I mean, I had Swift higher than Robinson coming into the league. I think everyone and their mother had Swift higher than Robinson coming into the league. So I think that's a completely fair thing to say. And it's definitely, I'm the one out of consensus saying that I would rather have Robinson than Swift.
That's fair. The only other thing that I think about is, so Brad Holmes is now the new GM of the Lions, right? And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Brad Holmes, he was part of the Rams when they drafted Todd Gurley, no? I think he was. I gotta make sure. I'm sorry if I'm just throwing this out there off the cuff. I didn't really think we'd be going that deep into it, but I believe he did. And if he did, like we're talking about Georgia running back to team, like you could start to see where this could be going. I know I'm taking kind of a leap. I'm skipping step B and C and getting to D, where we have DeAndre Swift getting a ton of usage. But I don't think it's that absurd with Brad
Gurley
Holmes.
and Swift are completely different backs. They just happen to go to the same school.
I get that they're different backs, but the thought process of like we're going to, we've got our main back, like they just did this year with Cam Akers. I mean, I know it took a little while for Cam Akers to learn the offense. Granted, they didn't really have a preseason and whatnot. But now you see what you were talking about with Cam Akers, how he's getting all these touches now. I don't think it's ridiculous to assume that they do go that route of we're going to give this guy a lot of touches, especially when you think about like they're not. I don't know what their deal is with Kenny Golladay. I feel like he's more likely gone than staying. Danny Amendola probably gone. Like they're not going to have a lot of receiving options. They're going to basically play through DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson, I feel like. So yeah, I just think the future is up for DeAndre Swift. I guess you guys think it's a cloudier thing. So it's just something we're going to have to agree to disagree on. Who was your other sell?
So my other sell is also a little spicy, just because he had a really good rookie year. It's Chase Claypool. We talked about it a little bit when we talked about the Steelers early on, but this team is heading into like a very transition, Patriots this season-esque mode. Whether that's this season coming up in 2021 or the year after, I think it really depends on Ben, and if he does come back. I don't know if he will. He was like crying after the game. I don't know. He may or may not come back, but we'll see about that. It's Ben. You're not gonna know for a while. He's definitely gonna probably just be like, yeah, I'm gonna see how I feel in a few months and then decide. But Chase Claypool obviously is very highly thought of in the Dynasty community right now, and rightfully so. He had a very good year, shown out to be a very talented receiver. But with Ben and this team potentially heading in the wrong direction, and with a lot of new faces potentially coming in, with James Conner heading out and Juju heading out, and maybe Ben heading out, offensive coordinator was fired. This team is going to look a lot different next year, and I just think Claypool might suffer a little bit, especially because if you're either playing with like a 39-year-old Big Ben, or I don't know who they're going to get at quarterback, because they're picking probably around 25 to 26 in the draft, whatever it is down there. So it's just an iffy situation. I think you can get a whole lot for Chase Claypool right now. Similarly to my argument with DeAndre Swift, is that not that I think Claypool's a bad player. I think he's very good, very talented, a guy I'd want on my team. But the value that you can get for him is just so much greater than what I think he will end up being.
Yeah, so I agree in that regard. Where I mentioned at the top of the podcast what I thought about where the Steelers are going. So I agree in that sense. It's also, Lounis had Claypool ranked earlier as wide receiver 15 when we did our wide receiver rankings. I don't know if that's changed for Lounis, but if he's around there, I'm going to sell at that price and just grab what I can. Yeah. In the interest of time, that's all I really got then.
I understand what you're saying, Jake, and it's a fair argument. I'm not worried too much about his QB situation. We saw week 17 up against the Browns starters. Even with Mason Rudolph, he had a great performance. For me, he just looks like he's just a physical beast of a receiver. I do understand the argument in terms of if people are kind of ranking him almost too high to sell on the hype and get max value for that, even if you do think he's good, you just think he's being rated a little bit too high. So that's the argument I can understand being made. But I'm personally still a huge Claypool fan.
Fair enough. So we'll move on. JT, who you got with your buy and sell?
Yeah, so someone who's probably off many people's radars right now is someone who he plays for the Colts, has 2 straight years of injuries, Paris Campbell. He's just, what I like about him is he's shown flashes in training camp where he's looked really great from all reports. And you get tons of those reports every year about certain players. The difference about Paris Campbell is we actually saw it in a real game setting. He just happened to get injured again the following game. I really like his potential value for what he is. He's probably got bought for fairly cheap. I don't know. Frank owns him if he wants to talk about what he'd give him up for. But I think he's someone that you could go out cheap buy. Like, it's very rare that you have trades for players at this kind of value, just because normally the owner who really believes in them the most is the one who has them. But if you go and get out Paris Campbell on your team, I think it's a good flyer buy. I think Philip Rivers will be back this year. It sounds like the Colts were willing to have him back if he was willing to come back. So it's kind of like a wait and see kind of thing. I guess he'll evaluate his options. But Philip Rivers likes to dump the ball off. We see it with Austin and Eckler on the Chargers. We've seen it with Nyheim Hines. Paris Campbell loves to run those, quick slant kind of plays. So it's a potential combination that could provide a lot of points should it come, and it's something that you could get for really cheap.
I actually like that buy because T.Y. Hilton is a free agent this offseason. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him. And especially if they don't, I think Paris Campbell's value goes up even more because he's kind of a similar build of a receiver to T.Y. Hilton, rather than kind of like a big receiver like Pittman. And I think he would take a lot of those targets. So I'm with you. I'm a big fan of Paris Campbell also. And then again, this is assuming, as we always do, that they recover normally and are back to how they were before.
See, I'm more on the avoid fade Paris Campbell. I don't like injury guys. I just think injury guys are guys to stay away from. He's just gotten 2 major injuries in back-to-back seasons. He's like you said, like playing when he played that one game, like he showed that he's pretty good. But then he got hurt again. So like the best type of player is an available one, and he's just not been available. Obviously, if you can get him for super cheap, if you can get him for a pick outside the top, 30 picks, whatever it is, like, sure, because at that point, you're just taking dart throws in the rookie draft anyway. But other than
Question.
that,
what I want to hear both of your answers. Would you trade an early third for Paris Campbell?
no.
I would.
JT, you say yes.
This draft's too good.
Yeah.
No.
I think
Okay,
the real
that's a fair
question is,
answer.
would you sell Paris for an early third? Just because you think about what it took to draft him, probably an early second round pick a couple of years ago. I understand his value's probably done nothing but go down, but I think if what JT was saying, is right. Like, if you can find an owner that doesn't like Paris Campbell, then go ahead, buy him, because you can get him at a great deal, a late second probably minimum. But I think that if there's an owner in your league that liked Paris Campbell, it probably you wouldn't be able to pick up for just any third round pick. Maybe on draft day if there's someone spicy on the board.
Yeah, like I get what Jake's saying about injury guys, and I would, if you guys want to just move into who my sell is, like when I have like a random flyer, like I don't mind getting an injury guy because it's like, especially at like a third round pick, like I like what Paris Campbell can potentially be, and out of the third round
that's
in this
the
year.
point, is that, like, yeah, I would buy, like I said, I'd buy him for like a mid to late third round pick, but there's a very slim chance that you're gonna get that based on what the owner likely had to use in draft capital to get him in the first place. So I don't think I would be able to come for a deal for him. But if you can get him for that price, I would be in.
Yeah, but we're push and pull. Maybe he's a throw into a different trade that you're trying to get, like for a different player. Like it's someone that you could acquire for fairly cheap. Like he's not a first round.
100% JT.
Yeah,
He's the perfect player that if you're doing a trade, throw him in, because that's where you get him real cheap. You move on to your sell now, but that's an excellent point.
Yeah. So on the flip side of the coin, someone who I think is starting to get overvalued and someone that I'm looking to sell this offseason, I don't actually have him personally, but someone that I would be looking to sell is Mike Williams. I was a big believer in Mike Williams from his Clemson days. I liked what he was doing at Clemson. Then moving to the NFL, he did have 1,000 yards in I think it was his first season he had 1,000 yards. Second season, sorry, third season because he got injured. He had 10 touchdowns in his second season. He had 1,000 yards in his third season. He just couldn't put it together so far. So a lot of people still believe in Mike Williams. It's just he was injured in his first year, so we didn't see it then. Then he's been banged up a couple of times. Like he has played in most of the games, but he was injured for most of the games. And now you have Justin Herbert at quarterback. So people are probably saying, like, Mike Williams with Justin Herbert and Justin Herbert in his second year, Mike Williams is primed for a breakout. I don't think it's going to happen. I think this was the year if it was going to happen. Justin Herbert was just chucking the ball. Like he had no fear. He was throwing it deep. And granted, some of them were to Mike Williams. But I think Mike Williams is that guy who's going to get hurt by those pass interference calls, because if it is on target to him, he's probably getting taken down before the ball gets to him or interfered with, and you're not getting those points, unfortunately. So it just hurts his fantasy value. Not to mention the Chargers are in prime position to go out and either get a wide receiver in free agency or get a wide receiver through the draft. They also have a few other wide receivers who are those kind of burner types. They're not as big or physical as Mike Williams that can jump up and get it, but Tyron Johnson, Jalen Guyton, they do like to run, go verts and stuff like that. So he's just someone who I think probably has a lot of value right now, just based on where he is, and I don't see him maintaining that value.
Is he a free agent in this offseason right now? What's the situation with that?
I think he's on the team this year.
I think
Okay.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think he's a free agent next offseason.
Yeah, I think he's on the team this year, but he'll become a free agent next year. Is what
I think you're right though, because if the Chargers don't draft a receiver in this draft or very early in the draft, I think you're right. That could be a really good sell, because he's going to start getting some nice hype if they don't pick a receiver like one of these top guys.
Yeah, and with Keenan Allen injured for a few games this year, like Mike Williams finished the year. He played every game. He missed one game. And he finished the year as in half PPR wide receiver 46. It's just, I'm not. I used to be a big believer. I think now is the time to cut ties, especially because I believe he's going to be one of those put him on your radar kind of guys. Like I said with Christian Kirk last week. It's just someone that I'd rather just have off my hands and have a more, for sure kind of guy, someone I could kind of rely on more.
Yeah, I really like that sell a lot. I think you nailed that one right on the head. Just to chime in, I looked it up. He is a free agent following the 2021 season because the Chargers did exercise his 5th-year option.
Really quickly, what would you be looking to get for him? Like a mid-second?
Yeah, I think that's fair value. Right around mid-second, yeah. And to be honest, I think if you wait before the draft, like I'd move him before the draft, but I really do think you could push that early second for Mike Williams. Like he is a name player, like he's got a brand to him. People recognize he's playing for the Chargers. He's got that young, fiery quarterback on his team. I think you could get an early second for him, and at that price, I'm selling because, like we mentioned, we keep alluding to it. There's going to be a lot of good wide receivers in this draft, and I'd rather just take the chance on one of those guys than hope for a 4th or 5th year breakout for Mike Williams.
Yeah, I think we covered that one pretty well. So we can move on to Lounis. Who you got in buying and selling?
So to start off with our buy, I've got the Jaguars rookie receiver Laviska Shenault. I'm guessing people listening kind of have an idea of why I'm so high on him. That is because obviously they secured the number 1 pick. And what is it? And Trevor Lawrence is going to be starting at quarterback next year. As for Shenault, he's been someone who we've seen this year. If they get the ball in his hands, what is it? If they get the ball in his hands, he can make plays. Like every time they get the ball, he's almost kind of like a running back at wide receiver. And I like his potential a lot. I do think there is somewhat of a decent chance that the Jaguars bring in another weapon this offseason, whether it be through the draft or through free agency to help support Lawrence. But I don't know, Shenault, I think you can kind of almost buy low on. Like we saw toward the end of the season, the last 2 weeks of the season, he had two straight pretty good weeks to end the year. Week 16, he had 5 catches for 48 yards and a receiving touchdown. And then week 17, he had 6 for 68 and 2 receiving touchdowns. And I don't know, he's someone that I like heading into next year that I don't think really he hasn't been talked about at all. Like I don't know if you've seen like just in the Dynasty community, I feel like he hasn't really been talked about much at all. And I like him heading into next season. I think we're going to get more into the coaches, but we've seen today the Urban Meyer news, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. But I think that he's someone that would be utilized a lot in that kind of offense. I'm sure he's someone who offenses will give carries to, ton of screen passes, ton of slants, just to get the ball in his hands, because once he does, he's a big playmaker. So he's someone I like as a buy this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I have some hesitations with Shenault just because of the drop issues that he's had this season. But I do like the hire of Urban Meyer for Laviska Shenault. I do think that they could try to use him in that similar role to the way that they used Curtis Samuel at Ohio State, in which they just try to get him the ball in as many ways as possible, whether that's out of the Wildcat, whether that's a screen pass, whether that's out of the backfield, or just a straight up pass. I think they're going to try to use him in a lot of different ways. I said this coming into this season, and I think Urban Meyer is the type of creative offensive guy to get that done. So I do like this one, but I do think the price tag might be a little high because people know that Lawrence is coming in and Meyer is coming in. So I think people are thinking very similar to you in this sense.
Yeah, that sums it up for me. I guess I lean with Jake there, but we kind of all think he could be something very special on the Jags.
Yeah. No, I've always just liked his talent, especially his elusiveness at his size. But so moving on to myself, he had a great season last year. He's an extremely talented receiver, but my sell is Amari Cooper. Now, if you own him, you kind of have some leverage because, like I said, he had a great season last year, especially with a backup QB. Considering it wasn't Dak for a majority of the season, he still had a good year. The Cowboys have an out in his contract after next season, where he's getting paid $20 million annually. And if they want to cut him next offseason, they only owe him $6 million, which they can split between the two next off seasons. So maybe 3 each. And I wouldn't be totally surprised if they do it. I think CeeDee Lamb is gonna take over pretty soon as the wide receiver 1. I think they'll have to make a decision on Gallup, whether they let him move somewhere else or whether they move on from Amari Cooper and they keep Gallup as the 2. He's someone who I'm just saying I think his value is really high right now, and I think now is the time to sell him because, like I said, just came off a great season. Cowboys can move on from him, which I think they should. I think, like, I don't know, especially once it never. That's why the CeeDee Lamb pick didn't really make sense to me because you already have Gallup, who's an extremely talented young receiver. You've had some good slots. I'm forgetting their names off the top of my head, but we've seen them make plays this year. And then Amari Cooper, who's obviously an extremely talented receiver, and you just give him $20 million per for like a long-term contract. And then you go and draft CeeDee Lamb in the first round, which don't get me wrong, CeeDee Lamb has been amazing. Yeah, I think he's an absolutely phenomenal receiver. I think he'll be a stud and a star for years to come. And I think he will take over the number 1 role. But I think while you have this offseason and you know he's going to be entering next year again as the number 1, I think now is the time to sell him and just get good value out of him. Because I think stuff's going to change pretty soon in Dallas.
All right, real quick. Let's do a price tag on both Laviska Shenault and Amari Cooper. What do you guys think you value both of them at?
What would I buy them at? Or what
Yeah,
would
let's start with Shenault. Let's start with Shenault. What you think he's worth? What you think you could get him for?
Right.
I think a pretty late second.
I think he's
Whoa!
I think he's valued at the early second at minimum because I think he was drafted. He was drafted near the beginning. He was drafted mid-second, and now there's going to be a lot of hype about him. I think he might be until the late first, kind of.
Late second, Lounis.
No.
Clown's going back on.
Part of me saying this is I expect the Jaguars to bring in another receiving weapon for Lawrence. If they don't, I agree with you guys. He's worth the early second, almost late first. I'm just projecting how free, which I guess I shouldn't have done. Like it's kind of a projection of future offseason moves. I hope the clown mask is fitting well. But again, that's the projection because usually when teams bring in that top quarterback, they'll usually bring in another weapon for him too. And that's what I think the Jaguars are going to do this offseason. But if they don't, I agree with you guys. He is in that early second range.
Don't think they do. They have too many holes to worry about wide receiver, especially when they just took one in the second round last year.
You could have said the same thing about the Bengals, and the Bengals brought in T. Higgins for Joe Burrow.
Well, the Bengals had AJ Green and Boyd, which like an aging AJ Green. He didn't even want to be on a team this year. People thought he was going to be traded or sit out. So like I understood that one, but with Chark and with Shenault there, I just think they have too many holes to fill to worry about a wide receiver.
If anything, if they brought in a receiver, I feel like it should impact the value of Chark more than Shenault, just because, like we were saying before, if he's gonna play that Curtis Samuel role, I feel like they could almost use Shenault more as a running back. Maybe it impacts the value of James Robinson then. I don't know.
I think.
Yeah, I think it's either Robinson or Chark. I feel like Shenault, no matter what, he's such a dynamic athlete that if you like his talent, then no matter who they bring in, unless maybe it's Rondale Moore, it shouldn't really impact your valuation of him. I can understand if you don't like him and you don't want to buy him, but if you have Shenault, you're not selling regardless who they bring in for a late second round pick, unless he plays like crap during the season.
Yeah, I'm with Frank and JT on this one. Shenault has to be, getting close to that late first value just because of the direction that we think this Jaguars offense is heading in with the additions of Lawrence and Urban Meyer.
Yeah, not to be redundant, but he was probably drafted in the mid-second, maybe even early second. He's played fairly well. Not a world burner, but he's shown some stuff, and the hype of Trevor Lawrence being there is just going to increase the value more. That being said, What about Amari Cooper? Would you trade Amari Cooper if you had him for a mid-first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even. I don't think you can get that.
Zero hesitation.
I feel like the question is almost who would you rather have, Cooper or Waddle?
I mean,
Waddle.
yeah.
It's gonna depend where he goes. But
I mean, I've seen a lot of Waddle to Miami at pick 18.
yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Reunite him with Tua in Miami, and I think that's a great spot. I mean, I don't think the Dolphins' weapons are really putting a threat here to Waddle's target share here. So I think it's a great move. Tua's comfortable with him. If that's the case, I would take Waddle over Amari Cooper in a crowded offense, potentially being cut at the age of 28 every year, every time.
But none of you guys would have Chenault over Cooper, right?
No shot. You can't.
Not yet. No.
No. So you got
What are you selling Cooper?
Yeah,
I was gonna ask.
You gotta have Cooper in that kind of. If we're selling Chenault for a borderline late first, like Cooper's got to be a little above that somewhere.
Yeah, I have Cooper around pick like 110. Put it that way.
I feel like you'd almost have more success trying to sell Cooper to a contender for picks outside of this class, just because everyone, we are getting into prime rookie hype, and this class is looking. If you're in a super flex league, especially, there's so many quarterbacks that it's just driving the value of these first round picks up a whole lot. So, I feel like you might you can almost get for Cooper to a contending team a 2022 first and second, whereas right now you would only get that late first, and that's a maybe. Like, how if you're a team with a 110, unless you're really a contender and you need a stable receiver, like how many people are giving up 110 for Amari Cooper right now?
Point.
I was gonna say I don't know if I'm giving up 110 for Cooper.
I think there's a good chance you can get Jalen Waddle at 110, which is what we just said I would take over Amari Cooper. So I agree. It's gonna be the trade market on Amari Cooper is gonna be very tough, very very tough. I agree. I think the strategy Frank laid out there of trading him for future picks, like not just this 2021 draft class, because everyone knows this class is good. This class is deep. There's a ton of quarterbacks, so super flex, those early first round picks are even further up. But people just tend to forget. And what the thing is, picks gain more value the closer we get to rookie draft time because people can put a name to the pick. When they can put a name to the pick, it becomes more valuable because people are like, well, that's basically like trading Jalen Waddle compared to back in week 3 where it's like, oh yeah, my first round pick, it'll probably be a late pick. Who cares? Like that, the mindset changes around draft season, and these draft picks become exponentially more valuable in the eyes of the owner of them as we get closer and closer to draft time. And that's just something you got to deal with, especially in the draft as loaded as this one. These picks aren't going to be moved very easily.